Wayne Ottinger began his aerospace career in jet and rocket propulsion in June of 1955. This chart starts with Wayne's heritage and summarizes the time spans of 66 years from the Wright brothers' first flight to the Apollo 11 landing, 87 years from the Wright brothers' first flight to the Hubble telescope, and 114 years if next year's scheduled launch of the James Webb telescope is met.
At 16, I was getting my private pilot's license at $3 an hour, 2 instructors paid by the school district.
This was an opportune time, just before the space program really took off. This presentation will focus on early spaceflight in the 1950s. As the Cold War heated up after World War II, our space program was greatly stimulated by Russia's launch of the first satellite, Sputnik, on October 4, 1957. U.S. aviation progress after the war brought in the jet age, transforming both military and civilian applications while providing significant growth in employment and economic benefits. Herein are some untold stories of how challenges were met over the past 6 decades of aerospace progress. This clip is from the HBO documentary of When We Left Earth. It starts with the X-15, which flew first on June 8, 1959, and then ends with Project Mercury, which flew Ham, the chimpanzee, on January 31, 1961, and then Alan Shepard, the astronaut, on May 5th of the same year.
In the high desert of California, NASA tests an experimental rocket plane, the X-15. They want to put a man into space, and they're in a hurry.
Rockets were powering aircraft to higher and higher speeds. The X-15 had enough energy to zoom to altitudes above the atmosphere.
The X-15 flies so high, pilots experience weightlessness and look out into the darkness of space. But even at 600,000 horsepower, it would need to fly 4 times its top speed to put a man into orbit. The Soviet Union holds an early lead in the space race, launching the first unmanned satellite to orbit the Earth.
On October 4th, 1957, when Sputnik went into orbit, people were so upset. They said, these people can't build a refrigerator. How can they get into orbit? How did this happen?
To beat the Soviets, NASA must launch a man into Earth orbit. Only rockets can go fast enough, more than 17,000 miles per hour. They call the program Project Mercury, and rally a team of determined young scientists and engineers to figure out how to fly a military missile with a man on top.
Most of us came in from aircraft flight test. We knew nothing about rocketry, we knew nothing about spacecraft, we knew nothing about orbits.
Gene Kranz joins the flight director's team in NASA's earliest days.
So it was a question of learning to drink from a fire hose. We had to learn all about trajectories. I'd never heard the term retrofire, coming on down from orbit, getting the spacecraft back home.
About 12 engineers and technicians manned the X-15 Mission Control Center, setting early precedents for NASA space operations. This expanded significantly through Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and then onto the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station programs.
The director allowed some of us to appear in the movie, so I bragged to my grandkids about co-starring with Mary Tyler Moore in her first movie.
The acoustics were such that it would be fatal for anyone exposed to the intense physical effects, thus requiring everyone to occupy the pillboxes shown in the next slide with their heavy lids clamped closed. Also, this provided protection from the explosion and fire experienced on the X-15 No. 3's early XLR-99 engine ground run. The 60,000-pound thrust chamber was cooled with a minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit ammonia fuel that was pumped through the 3/8-inch stainless steel tubes forming the structure. These tubes were coated by a rod-fed ceramic material at the factory before the injector assembly was welded onto the front of the chamber. The spalling in the throat area during early operations eventually leaked raw fuel into the chamber, threatening flight safety. Engine repairs using a factory-outdated process took about a year and $1 million per fix, threatening the entire X-15 flight research program. There were only 8 flight engines for the program. Wayne was assigned to research new processes. He selected adapting a new plasma arc process that used a small gun which sprayed pure metal and/or ceramic powders at about 20,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Several research labs were showing great results with gradated coatings. They started with thin coats of pure metal on the tube surface and then sprayed thin layers of hybrid coatings, increasing the ceramic content of each layer till the final product at the flame front was pure ceramic. The obvious solution to Wayne was to utilize this new technology to produce a field repair capability which could take a fully assembled engine and repair it with improved gradated coatings. This promised to make the coatings last much longer than the original Rokide zirconium oxide ceramics. The next 3 slides show the pantograph machine Wayne conceived. With the help of the NASA shops and 9 technicians, they built and demonstrated it to be used for engine field repairs. It was less than 3 months to develop and deliver this new system to the Air Force Engine Maintenance Shop. An Air Force jet engine rollover stand was mechanized to handle the rocket engine and convert it into a pantograph machine. It was designed to ensure that the plasma arc spray gun was held perpendicular to the chamber tubing contour at a constant distance from the tube surface while the engine mounted in the rollover stand was rotating at prescribed rotational speeds and longitudinal travel, much like a lathe. In this Bell photo, Wayne was 30 years old. He was assigned for 14 months as the NASA plant representative at the Bell Aerosystems Niagara Falls, New York plant for the Lunar Landing Research Vehicle design, manufacturing, and assembly. Under budget constraints, much of the final assembly and testing was done at the NASA Edwards Air Force Base facilities. To assist in preparations for that first flight, Bell sent about 20 engineers and technicians to the NASA Flight Research Center at Edwards for a 6-month period. Wayne here is flanked by 2 Bell VPs. On his right is General Walter Dornberger, the former Nazi general in charge of the missile works at Peenemünde, Germany during World War II. He was Werner von Braun's boss. The gimbal jet design, together with this ingenious combination of 4 simple sensors, provided the critical path enabling earthbound and free flight training for the moon landings. The flight dynamics of helicopters here on the Earth, flying in an atmosphere with aerodynamic forces, was totally inadequate for training. Thus, the LLRVs and LLTVs succeeded in flying on the Earth as if they were in a vacuum with no atmosphere and in the 1/6 gravity field found on the Moon. This is a short clip from a NASA video titled 300 Feet to the Moon. It includes the only soundtrack of the operation of the 16 90-pound thrust attitude rockets, the 2 500-pound lift rockets used to simulate lunar maneuvering, and the jet engine used to cancel the 5/6 excess Earth gravity. All this was done to create a realistic Earthbound free flight simulation for lunar landings.
Before an astronaut ever actually flies the LLTV, he was trained in a helicopter for at least 100 hours. He was trained in an LLTV simulator, completing a detailed program or syllabus, as the pilots call it. He was trained in a vehicle tethered to a large overhead crane. He has handled the LLTV mounted in a fixture where the vehicle will respond to certain flight commands. And he has powered up the LLTV engines with the vehicle itself tied down to become accustomed to the operation of the engine. Only after the considerable training, plus many briefings, is he ready to fly the LLTV. And in the photo picture, this is but a small part of the training necessary to learn to fly the lunar module itself.
In July 2007, Wayne assisted Neil Armstrong's preparation for his presentation to the Society of Experimental Test Pilots Symposium in Anaheim, California on September 29, 2007. NASA excerpted a summary of that presentation in this short clip.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space.
Soon after President Kennedy's call to go to the moon in 1961, a number of researchers began to think about the various aspects of a lunar flight. NASA's Flight Research Center at Edwards proposed a free flight lunar landing simulator program. The research test vehicle was intended to investigate the inherent problems of lunar descents where there is no drag and weight is only 1/6 of Earth. The proposed technique for simulating the lunar gravity installed a jet engine underneath or within the machine on gimbals, so the thrust was always vertically upward. The engine thrust would then be adjusted so that the craft's net weight, that is, its gross weight minus the engine thrust, would equal its lunar equivalent. The force required to lift the net weight would be provided by throttleable rockets. The first flight of the LLRV in October of '64 was flown by Joe Walker. First liftoff was what you might call tentative. The second was considerably smoother. During the following year, Joe Walker and Don Malik flew about 150 development flights, expanding the flight envelope and investigating the adequacy of the design and the systems. An advanced version of the LLRV, the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle, or LLTV, proved to be an excellent simulator and was highly regarded by the Apollo lunar module crews as necessary to lunar landing preparation. Typically, the pilot took off with the gimbals locked, flew out to the inner marker, which in this case was about 400 to 500 feet altitude, about a quarter of a mile from the intended touchdown spot. Arriving at the IP, he began a descent toward the target, switched into the lunar simulation mode, energized the lift rockets, and practiced the lunar landing. I was most fortunate to be involved throughout the entire lunar flying development. I had the pleasure of flying every one of the machines, the LLRF, the ground-based simulators, the LLRV, the LLTV, the lunar module, and even the Weber ejection seat, the last not by choice. NASA management was forever worried about the reliability and safety of these machines and continually wanted to shut them down. But the pilots insisted they were vital to lunar landing preparation, and they prevailed.
Drift into the right a little. Good. Safe. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Thank you, Neil, Buzz, and Mike. We're standing on your shoulders, building on your historic achievements. That drive to reach higher is alive and well in today's astronauts, who will travel aboard Orion on our very challenging path to Mars.
This plot of the LEM's actual manually controlled pitch maneuvers performed by Neil, contrasted to the dotted line of a projected automatic landing path, illustrates the value of the LLRV and LLTV flying experience that he received. He knew what to expect with the slow maneuvering rates over the rugged surface of the moon while running low on rocket fuel. Landing in a crater or on a boulder would be fatal and had to be avoided. Even with today's improved systems automating hazard avoidance, it is doubtful that future landings will be attempted without the astronaut's ability to provide manual control. Using manual controls are much safer than having to abort from an automatic system failure abruptly in the last critical maneuvers. Therefore, the future training protocol will almost surely follow the Apollo experience of so many years ago. As Neil Armstrong stated in his speech to the Society of Experimental Test Pilots Symposium in Anaheim, California on September 29, 2007, and I quote, "The United States is planning to return to the moon, perhaps as early as 2019. When that craft is on final approach to that flat-topped ridge near Shackleton Crater, I hope the person at the controls has had a simulation experience that is at least as good as the LLTV provided the Apollo crews a half-century earlier."
Apollo 11's running short on fuel is widely known. It's been widely discussed by the press and others, and even in mission control here, people were biting their nails as to whether I've been flying the machines at Ellington. We took off with 9 minutes of jet fuel and someplace between 90 and 100 seconds of rocket fuel. So we were always landing with 20 or 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 seconds. We had to. And so it wasn't very much of a concern to me in Apollo 11 because it was just like what I was used to. And if I made a mistake, it would be a bad one. So I think that was, Dave Scott thinks this is one of the more important aspects and one that I haven't really thought much about. But he does think that that's an important skill, let's say, important experience to make yourself have the mindset to be comfortable in a short fuel situation. So
Neil says it exactly the way I feel. You know, it's at, to me, it's at one step closer to the real world. You're out there at 400 or 500 feet. You got 5 minutes of fuel, 15, whatever the hell it is. It's only you and your maker. Okay, you're running a problem in the lunar land in the LMS in the simulator. You have a problem. You go topsy-turvy. You land into a crate. Push the freeze button. Let's go and have a cup of coffee and talk about it. When you're in the environment Neil's talking about, you don't have a change. You don't have a freeze button. You're going to either do it or not do it. And I want to know that I can do it and feel comfortable before I get out there 250,000 miles away and have to do it one time successfully. I think putting yourself in that environment, both a risk environment. You know, John's right. I don't want to crash an LLTV, but I'd rather have the option of screwing up here and learning something and getting out of it and doing it again, because I don't have that option when I'm landing on the moon. And so there's a lot of psychological effect to the comfort level I think we gained when we were in that real world in a lunar module, landing on a surface of the moon that we gained because of the environment we found ourselves in the LLTV.
I mentioned also with the aspect with regard to your earlier question, you do often change your landing point at some point after you're on your final approach. And a lot of the guys flying their practice sessions would intentionally change their landing point from the place where it was going and make themselves do that. It is, I grant you, I believe that aspect can be covered by many of these competing aspects, but it is an important part of training.
In also the sixth degree of freedom concept simulation you found yourself in. I don't find myself in a helicopter in a 6th degree of freedom mentality. I just didn't. I'm flying over there. But this one, you could drift over there. And if you intentionally put the drift in that we all did when we got familiar with what we were doing, you had to take it out. And we would pick a spot out there at Ellington to land on, and you'd force yourself to go in another direction so that you'd have to force yourself to correct. It was the environment that you found yourself in, and that you were there alone. You look over your shoulder, there was nobody there. You were going to land it, or you're going to pull the ejection seat. You're going to do one or the other. And I'd rather have that option here, because I didn't have it on the surface of the moon.
These 3 slides are examples of skill and dedication of the Australian LROC wizard to apply 4 decades of improved camera technology to enhance the Apollo 11 1969 footage. Click to play this 3-minute movie for approximately the last 500 feet of Neil's landing.
Eagle looking great. Your go. Altitude 1600. 1400 feet, still looking very good. Roger, 1202, we copy it. 35 degrees. 35 degrees, 750, coming down to 23. 700 feet, 21 down, 33 degrees. 100 feet, down at 19. 540 feet, down at 30, down at 15. Okay, 400 feet, down at 9. Gate forward. 1050 feet, down at 4. 33 and a half down. They're pegged on horizontal velocity. 300 feet down, 3.5. 47 forward. Put up. On 1.5 down. 70. Got the shadow up there. 50 down at 2.5. 19 forward. Altitude, velocity, light. 3.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down. 160 feet. 6.5 down. 5.5 down. 9 forward. Good. 120 feet. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. On any bite? Okay, 75 feet. Car's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet, down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. 20. Down 1/2. 30 seconds. Forward. Just. Good. Okay. Contact light.
Notice the limb descent module from the new imaging. The YouTube link shown on slide 16 will take you to an amazing demonstration of other Apollo missions, including tracks of the lunar rovers used on the later missions.
On December 9, 2008, the 4 Apollo astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11 commander on the left, Gene Cernan, Apollo 17 commander on the right, Harrison Jack Schmitt, Apollo 17 LEM pilot in the background, John Young, Apollo 16 commander not shown, and Wayne Ottinger, LLRV project engineer and LLTV technical director in the center, all briefed the NASA Constellation Altair Lunar Lander Project Office on the LLRV and LLTV programs. Their recommendations were to provide the Constellation program with a free flight LLTV designed and built with the new technologies available today, a half century since the Apollo program. On March 6, 2016, Gene Cernan was present in Boulder, Colorado for the last day of the Boulder International 2016 Film Festival, where his new film, Last Man on the Moon, was presented. After the showing of the film and a 30-minute Q&A, Wayne and Gene were able to reconnect briefly. This took place in Houston on December 9, 2008. Gene won the bet as Neil passed on August 22, 2012. Gene followed this year on January 16, 2017. We wish them Godspeed on their greatest adventure, their homebound flight.
And it won't be long, and there are gonna be fewer of us here. You know, and if you waited another 5 years, you may not have as many of us to talk to. Another 10 years, probably less than that. And God knows in 20 years, we'll be looking down from somewhere, I suppose, watching what you do. And
Looking at me down
you know, I tell you what, if you're here in 10 years, I'll be here in 10 years. Because you were first on the moon. All I did was follow in your footsteps, so that's the way it's going to be from here on out.
I hope Gene is absolutely right about the timing and how long they're going to be around, but I just want to share with you that out of a number of key people, we're losing them at 3 or 4 a year on this program, either Alzheimer's or death, and it's the sense of urgency on me it's very urgent to capture and get all this feedback as early as we can.